That was Shadow Gallery with Deeper Than Life off of their second CD, Carved in Stone, and Sanctuary before that with Seasons of Destruction off of Into the Mirror Black. I'm Ken the Metal Professor. That wraps up the music in this first hour here on Mostly Metal. We're on WVLP 103.1 FM in Valparaiso, and the last few weeks I've been breaking into the music as we approach the end of the hour to do a little thing called Ken's Dark Corner, and I'll keep that going this week until the top of the hour or just a little bit past, and then we'll get back to the music for about another half an hour of tunes. But right now, it's time for Ken's Dark Corner. It is time for Ken's Dark Corner here on WVLP. I still haven't come up with a catchier name for this, but the idea is that I have this 2 hour block to share with you some of the things that I care about most, including heavy metal, obviously, wrestling, which you'll hear about at 9:30, and also recently I've started sneaking in talk about horror movies. My other conversation stopper that nobody ever wants to talk about, like heavy metal, wrestling, and horror movies, is math. That's what I teach, but I'm not going to subject you to that on the radio. So I think this will probably be the end of me bringing in my indulgences. But 2 weeks ago, the very first episode of Ken's Dark Corner was about the Bad Ben movies that have been on Amazon Prime for a while. And then last week I talked about the Puppet Master series. This week I'm going to just kind of quickly go through a whole bunch of movies, 7 or 8, that I've watched recently. I watch a lot of these. I tend to not watch them in one sitting, though, which may or may not impact what I end up thinking about them. Generally, I'll get home from campus in the afternoon. The kids are home. We're all tired. It's a little bit before dinner, and I'll just kind of go hide in a corner and watch maybe half an hour of one of these movies, and then maybe pick up the end of it at night before bed or the next day or whatever it is. So generally, I don't get to watch all these in one sitting. But over the last couple of weeks, I've seen a handful of movies anywhere from 2004 through 2017. And so I can make some recommendations or some non-recommendations as the case may be. So here goes. In the last couple of weeks, I've watched these movies on either Amazon or Netflix. If I don't say anything, it was probably Netflix. I'll try to remember to say if it was Amazon. The first movie on my list, I did see on Amazon. It was called Crush the Skull. It was released in 2015. The director's name is Viet Nguyen. I hope I'm saying that right. He has not directed any other movies that would be well known, but he has directed episodes of television such as The Flash, Heroes of Tomorrow, and iZombie. So he's been working around in the right areas, I would say. Crush the Skull is a story about some people that break into a house to steal things, and it turns out that the house is the setting for a Saw-like scenario that a crazy serial killer guy has set up for his victims. And so then it becomes kind of a cat and mouse game through the house. That in itself, the story isn't actually all that great, but I thought that the dialogue in this movie and the characters were just terrific. So it was a lot of fun to watch. And so I can definitely recommend Crush the Skull. After that, I watched Wish Upon. This was Netflix. This came out last year, 2017. It was directed by John Lednetti, who also directed the Annabelle movie in the Conjuring franchise. This movie is about a girl who is given by her father, Ryan Philippe, who's a dumpster diver. Not many people have that as a profession in the movies, but he comes across a box that it turns out has magical powers and allows you to make wishes. At the start of this movie, and this is a mild spoiler, but it happens immediately, so hopefully it's not that big a deal. But, like in the very first minute of the film, the little girl comes across her mother who has just killed herself by hanging up in the attic of the house. And so she's traumatized, and her dad are trying to get along. And as she learns that she can make wishes using this box, she also learns that the wishes come with a price, and usually something happens to somebody very close to her. And so the movie goes on, and you start to think, and she starts to think about whether or not what happened to her mother was sort of a cycle of this, because it turns out that she was not the first person in the family to have the box. So it's one of these kind of teenage PG-13 movies. It's not terrible. I can give it a weak recommendation, but if you have other things to watch, you can definitely pass it. The next two I'll mention come in a pair, and that would be All Hallows Eve and Terrifier. All Hallows Eve is I don't know if you call it an ensemble movie, but it's a kind of like the VHS films, where it's made of some shorts which are tied together by a wraparound story that gives a reason for somebody to be viewing the shorter movies that in themselves are mini horror stories. So in this one, a VHS is given to some kids who have a babysitter, and they start watching the movie, and so there's a scary segment in this movie that they are watching, and we are watching them watch the movie, and then it goes from there. Some of the events in this film are okay. Its main claim to fame is that it introduces a character called Art the Clown, who is a spooky killer clown character. Spookier than Pennywise. He's played by Mike Gianelli, and this guy does a spectacular job playing Art the Clown with his facial expressions and physical mannerisms. The clown was introduced in a segment in All Hallows Eve. It was also a short film on its own, and I believe the original short film was buried into All Hallows Eve, so he was really trying to get this thing to take off, I guess. And then there is a full-length, quote-unquote, like an hour and 20-minute movie on Netflix right now called Terrifier, which the entire movie is about Art the Clown. I can give these two movies a medium to semi-strong recommendation. All Hallows Eve is not as strong of a movie, although it helps to watch it just to get a sense of this Art the Clown character and kind of watch his appearances in order. The movie Terrifier is really interesting to watch for the performance of the guy playing Art the Clown. And if you like violent horror movies, there is no shortage of violence in this movie. The story is non-existent. Kind of like Crush the Skull, this movie takes place mostly in one single location. There's actually two locations. The opening 20 minutes or so of the movie takes place in a diner. And that part of the movie I thought was a lot more interesting than later on, when the action shifts into this old abandoned warehouse thing, when it becomes just, here's the clown trying to get these people, and oh, look, somebody else has now entered the building, so the clown has to get them too. So the story isn't fascinating, but for the mood and the visuals of the guy playing the clown, I will recommend Terrifier. Murder Party. Also on Netflix. This came out in 2007. The director was Jeremy Saulnier. He also directed, after this one, in 2013, the movie Blue Ruin, which is a very well-made movie, and also Green Room, which came out in 2015, starring Patrick Stewart, about some people trapped by neo-Nazi nutballs inside a nightclub after the club closes down. Murder Party has a 6.1 IMDb rating, and I have no idea why. It's about a guy, kind of a nerdy loner sort of dude, who is walking along, and the wind blows at his feet an invitation to a Halloween party. So he gets dressed up in a cardboard getup, which kind of makes him look like the knight of the Black Knight from Monty Python's Holy Grail, the one that guards the little pass and says, "None shall pass," and then he gets his arms and legs chopped off. Imagine his armor made of cardboard and gray duct tape. That's what this guy puts together, and he wears it to this party that he found the invitation to. And when he gets to the party, he is promptly tied up, and things start to happen where it's clear that the people hosting this party were actually setting a trap and going to off somebody. The movie is supposed to be a comedy. It is supposed to be making fun of the New York art scene. And maybe that's why I don't get it, because obviously I'm not a part of any art scene whatsoever. There are, in the review sections on IMDb, a lot of people did say that they thought it was really, really funny and spot on with the satire. I didn't get it. I thought this movie was awful. It wasn't funny. It was disappointing compared to the other movies that this guy has done. And I cannot recommend Murder Party. But it's on Netflix and it's free, so if you want to see what other people thought was good about it, go for it. Landmine Goes Click. I watched this one almost just because of the title. This is on Amazon. It was directed by somebody who has like one other movie to his name, 247 Degrees Fahrenheit, which that movie is about people who get caught in a sauna. And I don't know how much of the movie takes place in the sauna, but there you go. The start of this movie also takes place in a single location because 3 friends are out hiking in the Romanian or Hungarian mountainside, and one of them steps on what is apparently a landmine, and so he cannot move from that spot. And so his friends go to get help, and the person who comes back, who they think might give him help, turns out to be not so nice of a person, and he does help them a little bit in the long run, but at a cost. And then the rest of the movie is one of the people that was in this original trio chasing him down to get revenge. And this movie gets really, really dark. So if you don't like dark movies, then avoid this one. But if you like kind of revenge movies and what was kind of a pretty interesting setup, then I think I can recommend it. So again, that's called Landmine Goes Click. Let me tell you right now, you're listening to WVLP 103.1 FM in Valparaiso. I'm Ken, the Metal Professor. This is Ken's Dark Corner. We are into overtime here as we cross the top of the hour, but this is the 3rd episode, and this has not happened. This hasn't not happened yet, so I'm getting used to starting this chatter before the top of the hour, and it carries over into the next hour. I want to try to see if I can get it. I don't want to start it sooner because I don't want to lose out on too much music, but I'm going to try to see if I can compress it, and I've got to learn not to take conversational derailments like that one is. That would be a good start, right, folks? So I'm recommending some movies that are available on Netflix and Amazon. I have recommended so far Crush the Skull, Terrifier. I have non-recommended Murder Party, and I've kind of been neutral on Wish Upon and All Hallows Eve. One I just watched over the weekend was called Shudder. This came out in 2004. It is a horror movie from Thailand, and it's kind of in that wave of movies like The Ring, where you see a lot of similar-looking special effects, ghostly appearances, and things like that. And this movie is called Shudder with 2 T's, not with 2 D's. And it's about people, a photographer and his girlfriend who believe they've hit somebody in their car on the way home from a wedding. And from that point on, when this photographer is taking pictures, like at graduations and things like that, he starts to see ghostly apparitions appearing in his photos for no reason. So the movie goes a little bit into the whole idea of spirit photos and whether they're real or not and why they might be. But mostly it's just, the setup for the scares and the spookies and stuff like that. And it's actually pretty solid, so I can recommend Shudder. This one had a 7.1 on IMDb. There was an American remake in 2007 or 8 maybe, which only had a 5.2 on IMDb. And so, as usual, the United States remake of this foreign horror film was not quite as good as the original. But there are some really good spooky effects. There are some nice jumps. There are jump scares, but they're not really cheap. You might think they're cheap at the time, but when you think about it, you're like, okay, I'll give them that one. That was pretty good. So I can also recommend Shudder. And to wrap this up with this last film, I just watched it yesterday, and I will give it a strong recommendation. It's called Stephanie. This is on Netflix. It was done in 2017. It was directed by Akiva Goldsman. Now, he is not known for directing so much as for writing and doing screenplays. So he has done the screenplay for some pretty heavy-hitting movies like John Grisham's The Client, Batman Forever. Okay, so maybe he's not a superstar. A Beautiful Mind, so okay, there his cachet goes up higher. Da Vinci Code, he adapted that to the screen. He adapted the Dark Tower movie to the screen. Now that's not going in his favor, but you get the picture that this guy has at least been screenwriting on a pretty high level. And so here he's trying his hand at directing. The story is really, really interesting. I will recommend it. I will not say anything about it because this is not a movie that you want to know anything about, other than maybe just the blurb that shows up. It's the movie starts where there's this little girl. The little girl actress is terrific. The movie is worth watching just for her. She is home alone and kind of puttering around and keeping herself busy, and suddenly you realize that she is really alone, that her parents are nowhere to be found. And so you don't know how long the parents have been gone. Eventually, you start learning about the disappearance and what's going on around this house a little bit. The parents eventually come back. That's all I'm going to say. This movie starts going in one direction. You start thinking about what's happening, and suddenly something different happens. And so you have to decide, whoa, wait a minute. It wasn't what I thought it was. And I think about 3 or 4 times the movie shifts directions in a very clever way where what's happening still makes sense, but your view of what's going on has to change to keep up with the new information. So it kind of keeps you on your toes. So good performance by the little girl, a really interesting story. When it's all said and done, it's not a classic, but it's definitely an interesting movie to watch, and so I will give it a recommendation. Of the 7 or 8 movies that I mentioned, if I had to just say pick 2 movies to watch, I would say Crush the Skull and Stephanie. So there you go. This has been Ken's Dark Corner. Maybe I'll do this next week, maybe not. Now back to the music. This is Mostly Metal here on WVLP. In this set, you're going to hear some Dream Theater and some Nightingale and some Twilight Force.